Welcome. All right, everyone. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Increasing Access and Affordability to High Quality Pathways Through Apprenticeships, hosted by Pathways Alliance. Pathways Alliance is an uncommon alliance of organizations dedicated to supporting and implementing diverse and inclusive educator preparation pathways and pipelines. So we include teacher residency programs, we include different types of fellowships. So this coalition seeks to bring together a broad and diverse group of organizations from around the country to curate and develop resources for state education, local education authorities, also decision makers and policymakers as well. So we seek information on designing, implementing, and improving quality for sustainable educator preparation programs. So this is including growing your own programs. We are working together to make this possible. And we are committed to reaching our Alliance goals. We are glad that you were able to join us today. And now I will pass it on to our Alliance partner and moderator, Patrick Steck from Deans for Impact.
Thanks, Sabrina. It's really great to be here with everyone today. My name is Patrick Steck. I'm the Senior Director of Policy at Deans for Impact. Deans for Impact is a national nonprofit committed to ensuring every child is taught by a well-prepared teacher. In my role, I spend most of my time thinking deeply about how to ensure teacher preparation policy is anchored in the stability of science, that our law and rule makers are supporting policies that are backed by evidence. Since the early days of the pandemic, Deans for Impact and our partners in the Pathways Alliance, some of who you see on the screen right now, have been at the forefront of advocating that our policymakers, our school partners, our higher ed partners really do more to mobilize the nation's aspiring teachers to address some of the moment's most pressing challenges, while simultaneously strengthening the future teacher workforce through rigorous, high-quality practice opportunities. With support from so many, we've had legislation introduced in Congress, the Secretary of Education, President Biden himself, highlighting the opportunity for teacher candidates to serve in a number of instructional roles like tutoring and via residencies, and seeing several exciting statewide and local initiatives really get underway in earnest. The space we've created today is in response to recent conversations around expanding K-12 registered apprenticeships. Amidst the rush and opportunity to establish and fund registered apprenticeships for our future teachers, we want to make sure that we pause to carefully consider how these programs are really high quality and actually lead to meaningful learning experiences for our aspiring teachers and our K-12 students. Research consistently shows that practice matters. We talk about wanting more practice for aspiring teachers to practice some of their teaching skills, but not all practice is created equal. Quality is as important, if not more important, than the quantity of the practice opportunities. For example, we know feedback matters a lot to develop expertise. So we need to think about who is providing apprentices feedback when they're out in the field. We know that breaking practice down into discrete skills can be really important and impactful for the development of future teachers. So how are these apprenticeship programs thinking about what skills our apprentices should be practicing at each point in the program over the course of several years? How are we making the practice relevant to what these candidates will experience later? How are we bringing school districts and EPPs closer together so that apprentices are practicing the same instructional materials and seeing the same training opportunities that their in-service mentor teachers might once they're actually leading classrooms of their own? Creating quality experiences is important for students and important for the learning of future teachers, but it also has incredible implications for the teacher pipeline. If candidates are not set up for success in situations where they're left on their own to figure it out, it could cause them to question whether or not teaching is actually right for them. And the reverse can really be true too. A well-supported and designed apprenticeship and other practice opportunities holds great promise for solidifying a bunch of individuals' desire to teach and supporting them in their ability to do that. These purposeful, high-quality practice opportunities often come with costs to our aspiring teachers, our schools, and our students. The Pathways Alliance and this group of folks on the screen believe that teacher apprenticeship programs hold great promise for reducing some of those barriers. Barriers such as the cost candidates must incur in order to work in schools by giving up other paid employment opportunities. At a time when our communities across the country continue to grapple with staff shortages, accelerating student learning, and strengthening and diversifying the teacher pipeline, our coming together is incredibly timely. Just last week, the U.S. Department of Education announced a new call to action for our states, our schools, our colleges, specifically our educator preparation programs, to create new and scale existing partnerships that hold the potential for addressing the nation's teacher shortages, including modernizing and scaling registered teacher apprenticeships. In this call to action, the department elevates efforts that are mobilizing aspiring teachers to serve students as tutors, residents, apprentices, as answering the call, as a potential solution for some of our nation's most pressing challenges. We hope you'll leave this discussion today having had the opportunity to understand at a high level the federal opportunities to establish and scale high quality teacher apprenticeships. But again, more importantly, we hope you'll leave with an understanding of how to ensure that these programs that ultimately get established lead to a better prepared, more diverse teacher workforce. Before diving in, I'd like to introduce my esteemed colleagues that are joining and going to be lending their expertise today. First, we're joined by Dr. Jacqueline Rodriguez. Jackie is the Vice President for Research, Policy, and Advocacy at the American Association of Colleges for Teacher Education, where she leads the strategy and content development for the association's research, programs and professional learning, state and federal policy, as well as our advocacy initiatives. So thank you so much for joining us, Jackie. We're also joined by Dr. Karen DeMoss. Karen is the Executive Director of Prepare to Teach at Bank Street College. She has served as professor and chair of education at Wagner College, director of the Institute for Urban Education at the New School, national director for research and evaluation and new leaders, and faculty in educational leadership at the University of New Mexico. And last but certainly not least, we are joined by our wonderful colleague, Dean Sarah Delano. Sarah is the Dean of the School of Education at Dallas College. Prior to joining Dallas College as the Dean in 2021, Sarah served as the Louisiana Department of Education. She served at the Louisiana Department of Education for 6 years as their Executive Director of Educator Workforce, as well as their Director for Educator Preparation Policy. So thank you all so much for joining us and sharing your expertise and insights into how we can ensure that these registered apprenticeship programs that we think hold a lot of opportunity for ensuring a stronger workforce for our students. But before diving into that question of quality, I'm hoping to start with a little bit of level setting. And so, Jackie, I know you and the team at AACTE have been updating members across the country about this incredible opportunity. And I'm hoping you can kick us off by providing a brief overview of the apprenticeship opportunity from a federal standpoint.
I'd be happy to, and I want to say thank you to Patrick and to my friends and colleagues on the webinar and those of you attending. This is indeed a really exciting opportunity, and I appreciate the time to give you somewhat of a landscape analysis of what the apprenticeship program from the federal level might look like, as those states are going to look quite different, or at least potentially could. So we at AACTE, alongside many other organizations, reviewed the application to the federal level Department of Labor around making teaching an apprenticeable occupation. And that application went out last year through indeed a lot of vetting and a significant review with other organizations. I want to make sure that those on the call know that the P20 landscape was involved in reviewing the application. So the unions, all of the national associations and professional organizations that are associated in the field had a chance to take a look. When we endorsed the application, we did so as the professional organization for colleges of education, knowing that we want to ensure, as everyone on the call does, that we do not distill any of our requirements when it comes to creating high quality teacher preparation and ensuring that every kid gets the teacher that they deserve. So when we looked at the application in particular, we looked first at the model. Tennessee, as a state, has actually endeavored what is the current apprenticeship model at the Department of Labor for the last 5 years. So they began this work early in 2018. They've had at least four cohorts work in that same apprenticeship model. They actually used federal funding to support the apprenticeship model. And in their case, it was a grow your own residency that they have embedded across, I think, 14 EPPs and around 62 districts, to my knowledge. So what does that mean? It means that from the commissioner down to the local level, the local education agency in state of Tennessee, they have identified candidates within high school who are interested in going into the teaching profession, or those who are in the teaching profession as paraprofessionals or classified staff, and said, we will support you if you want to become a teacher by either reducing or creating free tuition at a local ed prep program, and by offering you some sort of stipend. And in this financial capacity, it could look like a paraprofessional support aid, student teacher aid cost, or it could be something different. And as they modeled the program over years, they realized that they have great capacity to really look at how to diversify the teaching profession by starting a grow your own model in other districts. So they took that model, they sent it to the Federal Department of Labor to review, and they said to us, the reason that they didn't simply stop at the state of Tennessee's workforce development folks, so that's the state's Department of Labor, is because they truly believed that in an effort to ensure that the quality of teacher preparation in these types of models is universal, that they wanted to make sure that it was a federal type of application. And so in this case, what you're now seeing is in the Department of Labor's bulletin, an apprenticeable occupation in teaching. And I'll just put a comma there and say, my dad was a NASA engineer growing up, and I want to tell you that aerospace engineering is also an apprenticeable occupation. So that sets a little standard for us in that teaching is of high quality and of high value. And so in that same registrar, there's an application for states, for districts, and the application requires the integration of the ed prep program. So right now, the state of Tennessee has become the very first apprenticeable program as a state where they can actually use Department of Labor funding to support their work across all of those grow your own models. Dallas's college here is going to talk more about their particular model as well. And as Patrick noted, this is an available option for those of you who are interested in different funding outside of the Department of Education. And it won't necessarily supplant that at all, but it can supplement how you consider you want to develop a program. And we know that the teaching force is going to grow by at least 4% in the next decade. And yet we've seen steady declines in the teaching profession over decades, but in particular since the Great Recession of 2008. So if we really want to be thinking about not just the shortages, but the diversification of our workforce, this type of grow your own residency model is a great opportunity for folks who are interested in that bucket of money. So I'll pause there, and I'm looking forward to hearing from my colleagues.
Yeah, thanks, Jackie, for giving us that context and background into the amazing work that Tennessee helped spur. And as you mentioned, we're super excited to be joined by Dallas College, which was the first of its kind in Texas. So Sarah, my understanding is that there are two primary components of designing an apprenticeship program that those interested in applying should consider: the on-the-job training component and a related classroom experience. As a part of this design process, applicants must choose to design either a time-based or even a competency-based apprenticeship program. Could you share more about first the design of Dallas College's apprenticeship program, and then secondary to that, why you chose to draft a competency-based apprenticeship application?
Yep, happy to share. So I'm going to give just a little bit of context around Dallas College before I answer your question, because it will help everyone understand the decision we made to do a competency-based program. So Dallas College is one of the largest community colleges in Texas and the first community college in Texas to be able to offer a bachelor's in education. This is a really new program. We actually launched our first cohort of students in the bachelor's upper level courses in fall of 21. And so as we were beginning to develop our program, what we were thinking a lot about is how we can develop a program that is job embedded, that includes relevant and real world competency-based coursework, and also centers coaching. And so we were going down the pathway already of articulating a set of prioritized teaching competencies that we believe our students must be able to master before we would approve them for certification. And so when we were thinking about how do we structure this program in deep partnership with school systems, we saw this as a really important opportunity to partner effectively with school systems. And so as we were thinking about applying for this, we were already planning to have our program be structured so that the final year of the program was a work-based learning opportunity. And when we were thinking about how exactly we were going to put it together, we were thinking about what are the key teaching skills that our candidates need to learn, what's the role of coursework in that, what's the role of the work-based learning. And so in putting together our application for the apprenticeship, what I think is so important about it is in the application, you need to outline for the competency-based, what are the skills that students need to learn, and then what is happening in the coursework, what is happening on the job that's going to support the development of those skills. You have to do it up front. You have to run all of this by your employers, get feedback from them. So it's a really important mechanism. We saw it as a really important mechanism to gain alignment around what we were teaching in the program and to make sure that it was really going to meet the needs of school system partners. And so as a result of doing this, our school system partners know exactly what we are going to be teaching candidates in coursework in that final year. They gave input on that. We've aligned around it. They know how they can support the learning experiences on the job, and we know how the coursework can support it. And the beauty of it is that because we are a registered apprenticeship program, as you were saying, Jackie, we have some money to put into this, which I think is really important as well.
Thanks, Sarah. A quick follow-up here is like making it concrete for folks about like those competencies that you're referring to. Could you give us an example of like what one of those competencies is and how you might see it being applied both on the job training as well as in the coursework?
Yeah, definitely. So we have 5 prioritized competencies, and one of them that I think a lot about, because I think it matters so much, is the competency around eliciting and interpreting student thinking. And so when we're thinking about this competency, what we have identified is how will candidates practice this skill during their on-the-job learning? And then how will they get feedback around it from our faculty members? And so in whatever work-based learning experience a candidate is in, they will actually need to video record themselves delivering a lesson, asking open-ended questions to elicit and interpret student thinking. That video will then go to their faculty member. They will provide feedback on that. There will be a reflection process. And the artifact, that's the video and the reflection, that's actually one of the key assignments for the course. So that's the way that they're going to begin to earn credit for the course.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. At Deans for Impact, like we think so much about like the simple model of the mind and how the brain actually works to support children in their learning development and the actions that teachers can take to activate that learning process. And we know that like focusing attention on the content and thinking really deeply about it is actually what's like encodes it and creates that schema that can ultimately lead to the learning. So I love that the competency you chose to highlight was thinking about how to elicit that student thinking and really deepen that thinking. You also mentioned like how your school partners know exactly what they're going to get out of this. And so Karen, I'm going to bring you into the conversation here. As an Alliance partner, we're all committed to increasing access, affordability, high quality teacher preparation. But I'm wondering how like increasing the number of approved apprenticeship programs like the one that Sarah just described or the one that Jackie described coming out of Tennessee might actually benefit multiple stakeholders, everyone from our state leaders to our school leaders that Sarah alluded to our higher ed partners.
One needs to unmute after 2 years. You'd think you'd learn. Thanks very much, Patrick and Sarah and Jacqueline, for your comments. There are so many ways that there are benefits to this new possibility for funding streams. Let me step back and just say that our particular project, Prepared to Teach, has been around for about 6 years, specifically focused on the affordability and sustainability of high quality teacher preparation pathways. And somehow or another, for me, that's part of the nexus here. Our historical systems were not built such that higher education and districts were deeply integrated together, where they were deeply partnered together. This is not how the systems were built. And so any ways in which partnerships happened, it was because the people on the ground wanted them to happen. They weren't built naturally inside the systemic structures that we have. For districts, to me, one of the most exciting pieces is that these things have to be co-constructed. They have to be talked about together. As Sarah said, they sat together and thought about what's our curriculum? What are the kinds of things that we need to do, that we want to do, to be sure that folks who are going in as initial teachers also have that really deep background that they will need to be able to stay in the profession to really build deep content knowledge over time as they move from being novice educators into being more expert and veteran educators. And so thinking about those pieces in partnership with the school that needs you to be able to do something today, that gives you this opportunity to really build that bridge between the broader preparation goals that do exist across higher education and other teacher preparation education EPPs, and what needs to happen inside a school today. So that opportunity at the district level has a couple of things going for it. So one is that they come to understand what people are coming in with. They can more directly support them both during that preparation period and also obviously as they're coming in their first year teaching situation. And also they're getting this new resource to be able to talk with them about, hey, here's some of the things that we're learning that our institutions, our programs are really focusing on in terms of, for example, the science of learning and development. Not something that folks inside schools and districts have a lot of time all the time to follow. And these kinds of conversations can really foster these shared movements towards some of the kinds of quality pieces that all of us want for everyone. You're not going to be able to create those kinds of partnerships, to create those kinds of really deep situations for folks to do clinical practice unless they can afford them. Because surprise, people cannot afford to work for a year for free. And if, for example, a residency is a really great way for somebody to come into the profession, you can't expect them to do that for free. So you've got to have the funding sources. And the funding source at the Department of Labor is a larger funding source than has been available for teacher preparation through the Department of Education, simply because of the way the buckets of money work at the federal level. So really great opportunity for these partnerships to support districts because there's money for candidates to be able potentially to come into these high quality programs so that you can actually design them and have people be able to attend them. At the state level for me, well, actually, let me do the preparation program. At the preparation program level, it's an opportunity to be able to bring in folks who cannot necessarily without financial supports beyond what financial aid institutions already provide. And they do provide a lot. I don't know how many folks on the call may know this or not, but about 2/3 of the costs of getting a degree are not related to tuition. It's the living expenses. And so being able to find some ways to support candidates while they're doing their clinical practice in particular, which for folks in education programs is the largest proportion of the debt that they incur. And then they become teachers and it's hard to pay back that debt. So helping people during this clinical time with some extra funding is super important for everyone, for the aspiring teachers, of course, but also for programs to be able to have the enrollment, the robust enrollment that they need in order to be able to continue to mount their programs and grow in their strengths. At the state level, because the Department of Labor apprenticeship processes have some linkage to every state. And of course, every state is a little different, which is why you're not getting the here's what it looks like. There's 50 plus versions of it, right? Depending on if you're also counting DC and Puerto Rico, et cetera, right? Every state looks a little bit different, but because there are some supports from the federal government to help states build stronger apprenticeship systems, states have the opportunity right now today to think about what do we want to do in our state to design an apprenticeship system for teachers that incorporates the best of teacher preparation so they can incentivize their programs and their districts to come together to build the kind of partnerships that meet the standards that are not their minimum standards for approval, but that are actually the state's aspirational standards, which with some additional funding, we have the possibility across the sector to realize.
Thanks so much, Karen. I hear so much of what you just shared about the value proposition that this opportunity holds for our state leaders, our ed prep leaders, our students, and our school and district leaders, in thinking about like, how are we simultaneously raising the ceiling of what we expect of the quality of those entering the teacher workforce, but simultaneously making sure we're also raising the floor for our students and for those who for way too long have been systemically marginalized and kept out of the profession to support these students who need the supports the most. And so I just like really love that. And I know we're getting a couple questions about like the specific requirements and the specific opportunities. And so as we transition, I'll provide a few links to an FAQ and a webinar series that the Department of Ed and Department of Labor have collaborated on to break down some of these grant opportunities that Jackie highlighted. But I really want to like continue to like zoom in on this conversation around like, how do we make this a meaningful, high quality experience for our future teachers and for the K-12 students that are able to serve right away. And so Karen, I'm going to like push it back on you. So you talked a lot about the opportunities for becoming an approved apprenticeship program holds for all these different stakeholders. But as more programs apply and are attracted to apply because of the financial incentives associated with it, what are some of are there potential risks? And if so, like what are they as you see them for teacher quality?
Thanks for that flip side question, Patrick. I don't know how many of you were ever in rooms back in the day around race to the bottom as a term, right? There is some possibility that variants of access to apprenticeship dollars, whether through some kind of reframing of what it means to be quality, that those could proliferate as a result of this door opening. And those variants could allow folks to enter the profession without all of the things that we would want everyone to have. It's possible that a teacher of record model, and Jacqueline, you may be able to correct me on this if you know differently, that a teacher of record model might be able to go through as an apprenticeship. As how I read things right now, it seems as if that's possible. And while many teacher of record models have heroic individuals in them, and programs that really work hard to provide the supports for people who are teachers of record, I don't know anyone who says, oh yeah, I was just as good as a teacher of record as I would have been if I'd had preparation with somebody alongside someone as an apprentice before I became a teacher of record. So thinking about how to be sure that we get the folks into the pipeline that we need, but we don't use this as a way to change our standards so that sort of anybody can now have access to go through any kind of program, I think is really incumbent on states. So whether every state is going to be thinking about that and trying to be sure that their education departments and their labor departments are talking together to share some understandings about what they want to do with this amazing opportunity to raise that bar, I think that's a question. I don't know that anybody would be able to say that all 50 states plus are doing that right now. So how the field can encourage our state education and labor folks to talk together and think towards quality, I think is one of my biggest questions about how we're going to be sure we have it universally as a high quality across the country. The other piece is we all know that an application is not always the same thing as what happens in practice. And on an application, you're explaining where linkages are, right? You're crosswalking, right? What your coursework looks like and what your clinical looks like. And you're doing this sort of crosswalk piece to it. That crosswalk piece may not do as much in terms of that really deep reflective practice between what you're learning in the coursework and what you're experiencing on the job, that a really strong, for example, residency program or a really strong student teaching experience does, if it's not really integrated well, it's just crosswalked. So thinking really deeply about what that integration looks like, more so than the articulation of sort of standards on a piece of paper look like. I think that integration component is where we may lose some of the quality possibilities if the field isn't really attentive to that.
Thanks, Karen. And Sarah, as someone who has spent a lot of time in state policy leadership roles and now overseeing a program with incredible responsibility for delivering meaningful instruction to students, I'm wondering, how do you think about these concerns about quality, some of these concerns that Karen just raised?
Yeah, I think it's incredibly important to, as we were developing our program, we put some really clear stakes in the ground around what we think matters with regard to teacher preparation. So the way that I think about quality is I do really believe that in order to be an effective educator, you need to be in a space where you can practice with students in a sheltered environment. I think that that matters a great deal, that you are in a space where you can try out teaching a small group of students how to read after observing a mentor teacher doing that, getting feedback on that practice from faculties and mentors, and then trying again. And so as we were developing our program, we really centered this idea of sheltered work-based learning opportunities, also centered the idea of what is it that we're teaching? What do we think matters with regard to preparation? And those were hard conversations that took months to really align on what are the prioritized set of teaching skills that a candidate needs to know and be able to do. Once we aligned on those competencies, we are now in the process of developing a series of performance-based assessments that will measure mastery of teacher candidates' competencies with the, throughout the program. And so I think that matters a lot. I think that we still have a lot of thinking to do around the coaching component. I think coaching, the research shows how much coaching matters. And so that is a piece that we're really looking forward to digging into as our candidates are beginning their residencies in the fall. Thanks, Sarah. One quick follow-up. I always think it's so great to get the perspective of what this actually looks like in practice. And so you described the importance of these sheltered environments. Could you give a little bit more color to what might in a sheltered environment that Dallas College is able to create for candidates who are enrolling and matriculating through your apprenticeship program? Yeah, so the way that we're starting this in the junior year of the program is supporting students in being in work-based learning roles that are tutoring roles. So we know that school systems have a great need for tutoring. We also know that with tutoring, you are working with a small group of students, and we are actually structuring the tutoring opportunities so that our students are able to be in the classroom with the teacher of record during the day to see what the students are learning. And then they're staying after school to do the tutoring on their own after they have seen what the teacher has done in the classroom. And then we are also working with nonprofit partners to provide coaching and support. So that's the way that's the direction we are moving in terms of an early work-based learning experience. When we're thinking about moving into the residency year, this is taking shape in a variety of ways. And so with one of our school system partners, the way we are structuring the residency is that our students will be acting as substitute teachers for 1 day a week, and then they will be acting as residents for 3 days a week. They will be paid for this. With another school system partner, they're going to be tutoring during the residency. And so what we're trying to accomplish is to understand what the short-term workforce needs are for our school system meet those needs while also providing high quality clinical experiences where our students can be paid. Most of our students at Dallas College are first generation college students. Most of them are Latina. I think, Karen, your point about you just can't afford to have an unpaid year-long residency is incredibly important.
Thanks, Sarah. And just to elevate for folks, like this conversation is about teacher quality, but want to also like highlight all the implications that the opportunities Sarah described have for teacher pipeline, and making sure that like we're teacher pipeline and ensuring that our students right now today who are in classrooms and need additional support are receiving that, whether it be through tutoring, whether it be through addressing the substitute teaching crisis with our aspiring teachers, and then again through those more whole group instructional roles that folks can play once they enter their residency year. And so, Jacqueline, I'd love to like bring you into this conversation to think about another component of quality, which is diversity, and thinking about how to increase the diversity of the teacher workforce so that it's more reflective of the students it actually serves. So research tells us time and time again that a more diverse workforce is a more effective workforce. How might increasing the number of approved residencies through apprenticeship programs actually lead to efforts? How might it impact efforts underway to diversify the workforce?
I think Sarah actually just answered that question to a really nice bow, and Karen just sort of teed this up in that regardless of the candidate, we shouldn't be asking students to work full-time and not get paid, because we know that that year not only is reducing their ability to pay back student loans or have to take out additional student loans, but they're also working at night. And so they're not really getting a quality of life that should be parallel to when they enter the profession, right? They're getting a really misaligned interpretation of what teaching should look like in the future. And so when we think about diversity and diversifying not just our educator workforce, but really thinking about who we're putting in front of students in every capacity, teachers, paraprofessionals, classified staff, it's really important that we take into account like who has access to being in those classrooms with those kinds of mandates and rigid requirements, and not having opportunities to have either second employment or a spouse, et cetera. So I'll just give you a bit of data for folks who are interested in this kind of like evidence base. AACTE produced an issue brief a few years ago looking at how diverse candidates are actually paying for college right now. And you will not be surprised, but maybe it's good for you in your advocacy to know that when we look at African-American and Black teachers moving into the profession, candidates in aggregate, so this is an average, are more often taking out loans than any other demographic group. And those loans are not entirely misaligned with their colleagues. So if I'm in a school of business and I'm taking out $20,000 and I'm in a school of education, I'm taking out $20,000. No, when we think about it, it's the same amount, right? However, what we look about when we talk about quality of life is debt to income ratio. And your colleague in a school of business is going to have a higher paying job when they move into their profession, whether it's public or private sector. And your colleague in the school of education is going to have a much higher percentage of debt to income ratio, to the point where your loans are actually superseding your quality of life. And so when we think about that, the Latin community, Latinx community, so my colleagues will say, I didn't go full-time. I went part-time. I have children. I have a family that I'm supporting. And in this case, as opposed to taking out additional loans, we're seeing our Latinx community members actually take much longer to continue in their work and maybe not even culminate in that. So to your point, it's not simply the apprenticeship that is going to make a dent. It's the fact that the apprenticeship application requires a residency style support system that is financially based. And I feel like whether it's accessing funds from the Labor Department or the Department of Ed, the key here is ensuring that we are financially supporting candidates so that they're able to access their education with the high quality of life and they don't have that debt when they walk out.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jackie. And everything you said just resonates so much that it's like making sure that we're not like our teachers who are in the classroom right now are already overburdened. We all know teachers in our own life and own circles that just come home exhausted every single day, that like we can't be placing that onus and burden on them prior to them even entering the profession. And this is like one way in which I think there's a lot of excitement right now to solve for that, which is just, it does give me a little bit of hope in the moment. And so I have one more question for each of you before kind of opening it up to Q&A from the audience. And it really is, what advice would you give to either a state or program or school leader to ensure that if they want to pursue this opportunity, that it actually leads to more equitable and rigorous learning experiences for future teachers and for students? And so maybe Karen, I'll kick it to you first. And just curious, what advice would you like to impart on folks?
Don't you just hate it when people don't like answer the question you asked? So instead of advice, it's closely related. I'm going to say what my ideal worldview would be. So in my ideal worldview, we have people from all 50 states plus DC and Puerto Rico and whatever other places are eligible for the registered apprenticeship programs. And you from this call, take the step to contact your state level AACTE group, if you've got that, to contact whatever your sort of educator preparation program groups are, and to contact your state ed department and to say, you know, this is an opportunity for all of us to do these things that we talk about. It'd be nice if we could, because that's what we know good preparation would look like. And then you make the plan across those two sectors to have state ed or the other appropriate people reach out to Department of Labor and start talking about what this should look like for our state. That's my ideal. Otherwise, my direct advice would be contact your Department of Labor if you're wanting to go something alone. But I think that the field is ready for changes, has been for a long time. We've never had access to the finances that would allow us to do this. We have an opportunity here that it would be just a terrible crime to waste. So let's make good on it.
I love that. The time is now. And while we want to transform the next generation of the teacher workforce, like there's kids in classrooms, in seats who need our love and care and support. So thanks for that. Jackie, I'll ask you next. What is the advice you'd like to impart, or Karen's approach here? Like, what's your ideal situation that comes out of this opportunity?
Oh, my ideal situation is that everybody who wants to be a teacher can become one for free, but we're not there yet. So my advice, I'll start by saying what I'm nervous about, and perhaps others feel similarly. I'm nervous that we have this really incredibly robust, well-designed application at the federal level to address teacher competencies, to ensure we have great high-quality teachers in classrooms. And then we have states who might want to address teacher shortages, and there will be a discrepancy in state level applications as opposed to what people can be doing with a federal level application. So I mentioned earlier, we have a handful of states that already have teaching as an apprenticeable occupation. Not all states, actually just a few. And if we see more states interested in accessing DOL funds for teaching, what I would like to encourage and recommend is that they work with us and others on the call to create a robust guideline and guardrails so that their application does actually yield the type of teacher you want your child to have and the kind of teacher that will persist, because we know that underprepared teachers just leave. So that's my recommendation for folks who are interested in doing it. I know lots of you are interested, but we can, get together on a call, and I'm happy to connect you with other people who've already done this work and have these apprenticeships underway. And so let's make an application that's really great.
Yeah, I love that. There's a real call there to our state leaders in particular to focus not on only addressing the quantity of teachers we need, but the quality of folks that our kids deserve. So I super appreciate that, Jackie. And Sarah, I'm curious, as one of the leaders in the country, like doing this work right now, what you hope folks take away from as they consider this opportunity for themselves.
Yep, what I'm thinking a lot about, I am going to answer your question and give some advice to educator preparation programs that are considering this. And I will say that I think what is most important before you start, drafting an application is just outlining for yourself, why are you doing this and what are you hoping to accomplish? With Dallas College, the reason we chose to do this is because we were trying to figure out how to put some more funds behind really robust work-based learning opportunities and how to create a structure that would really require deep partnership with school systems. And so that's why we did this, because we saw it as an opportunity to achieve those goals. And so I think it's important to consider, because I know it's the hot topic, right? Like there's so many webinars about it, but like what is it? How will it support your own program, and the effectiveness of your program is something that I think is really, really important to consider.
I really love that. Define the why, and hopefully tying that why to the students and the community you're serving, and think about what are the goals that you and the outcomes that you hope to see related to that why. So just in closing, thank you everyone for joining us. Every single day, I and these folks on the screen hear from leaders that are really scrambling to find enough talent to staff classrooms. And I'm sure many of you, Karen, Sarah, even, and Jacqueline, get to share a bit of good news. And that's like a lot of EPPs and school partners are doing the work. They are figuring out how to mobilize teacher candidates in a number of school-based roles, including, as Sarah mentioned earlier, tutors, as residents, and now thinking about this opportunity to deploy them as apprentices. It's just an incredible honor and privilege to gain insights into how these institutions, these schools and communities are thinking about the role of aspiring teachers in addressing today's challenges at the same time as preparing our K-12 students for the challenges of tomorrow. So right now I'm going to kick it back over to Sabrina, who's been monitoring the chat and receiving questions from folks both in the registry and as we've been going along, and she'll open it up. So Sabrina, over to you.
Yes, thank you. So I would like to name that if we do not get to your question, we will have a part 2 of our webinar that will be doing a deeper dive at the end of this month. So please look out for that. And I will also be sharing other resources in our chat today about other webinars with some partners that will be conducting webinars later this month regarding the same topic. So we'll be sharing those with you as well. But Nicholas Gillian asked, I'm wondering, Dallas College and others, how do you prepare candidates in coursework to interact in culturally responsive ways that build intellective capacities before asking them to do it with their students? So he's asking, the description of how interns observe and receive feedback makes sense, but how do you prepare them to instruct first, especially when the task is disrupting systematic problems of practice present in public education and some coaches' classrooms?
I can take a stab at this. I'm not sure if I'm quite I might not be answering the question, so I apologize if not. One of the key teaching competencies that we outlined was actually a competency around knowing yourself and the way that your identity could show up in the classroom, and being prepared to respond to your students instead of reacting. And so what we are thinking about is we believe that before you can be culturally responsive in the classroom, you need to know a lot about your own identities, the way they show up, and have had the opportunity to explore that early on as sort of a foundational skill. So that's one of the things that we're thinking about. Another thing with this is, once a student is in the classroom, what kind of coaching are they getting, right? Because coaching matters so much. And are they receiving coaching around their ability to be culturally responsive?
Great. Melissa Tooley asks, how can we help districts and schools become more open-minded about school staffing models, both to allow residency/apprenticeship models to flourish, but also make teacher roles more manageable? I find this to be a significant hurdle in moving this work forward.
So this is not my answer. I will communicate what I heard. Clarksville, Montgomery County, the school commissioner, in truth, I'm not sure what Dr. Imperitrist's title is, but he will correct me later. What he noted with regard to Austin Peay State University, which is a strong partnership with the Tennessee model, where they have this apprenticeship program running for now a couple of years, is that the two organizations didn't actually have deep, meaningful, or significant relationships. And in truth, some of those relationships were quite tense. And it took not just a couple of years, but a lot of continuous dialogue, monthly conversations where the school district and the EPP got together, to Sarah's point, to determine what were the school district needs and how could the EPP align what they were doing to prepare candidates with the needs of the district. And in those conversations, that relationship started to blossom and became so strong that now that school district doesn't actually have a teacher shortage. You know, they're reaping the benefits of that meaningful relationship now for years to come. But several of us actually just participated in an educator, well, it was a teacher educator shortage summit, so to speak, where we talked about, you know, what are HR directors doing to help recruit into schools? And it was a unique landscape because they had all of these really cool strategies that I don't think that ed prep programs recognize, to include things like, you know, banners to help classified staff recognize the cost of being a bus driver elsewhere as opposed to the benefits of being a bus driver in the school system. But what I took away from that was that the people on the ground in the school districts are not always the people that the ed prep program is communicating with to actually place candidates. And so there's a misalignment with whom you are talking within your local communities about what opportunities exist. And it might actually be that you need to talk to the chief human resources officer, or the chief talent officer, or even the COO, to let them know that there are all these ways that you can get candidates into schools as assets, as opposed to these burdens that they may be perceived as because they need more mentorship or support. And so I would encourage us to start talking to the people who aren't at the table, as opposed to trying to communicate yet again to the people who are.
And something that I'd like to jump in on that, because I couldn't agree more, Jacqueline, and it's also like what we're communicating. I think that like oftentimes, and I'm guilty of this too, is like we're so entrenched in the weeds and talking about like the application opportunity, how to shift the system and how to create the structure through residencies, that we forget what it's about. And it's like, what's that interaction between this teacher, in these cases, the aspiring teacher, and the students they're serving. And I think we can all do, particularly those of us in the nonprofit space, in elevating really concrete stories of like what meaningful teaching and learning looks like, and how aspiring teachers are playing a role in that space right now. And so I know Melissa Tooley offered that up, and New America is doing some great work in that space. So shout out to them. But I think we can all do more to like really talk about that why and define the why this matters, as Sarah said.
So this question is for Sarah. Could you remind, and I know probably you already said this already, what is the key learning experiences that are articulated and ensured happening at each program?
Yeah, so it's a lot, and I can perhaps send, well, I have to make sure I can send this, but maybe I can just send around the way we developed this. So what we thought about is we have 5 prioritized teacher preparation competencies. We looked at, okay, if these are the key things we need candidates to know and be able to do, and then these are the courses that they need to take during the final year of the program, because they have to take courses. Like this is not, just the residency, there are courses. What we then looked at is what are the specific experiences our students need to have with elementary students. We're preparing an elementary in order to show that they've mastered the competencies. And so that's what we've laid out for school systems. One of them, as I had mentioned before, is you have to video record yourself eliciting and interpreting student thinking. We have one, a lot of them are based upon specific teaching videos that candidates need to take while they're in the classroom. And so we have another one that's based upon building a positive classroom culture. We have another one that's focused in, on all of your different content areas. And so perhaps I can share that out so that folks can get a sense of what that looks like and what the arc of learning is across the year.
And we will conclude with our last question. Can you describe the difference between the coaching and feedback candidates get in the apprenticeship versus the feedback candidates have traditionally gotten during fieldwork?
I don't know if this question is for me or not, and I don't know if I'm the one to speak.
No, it is not for anyone specific. Whoever would like to take a stab at it.
Yeah. I don't know if I'm best positioned to answer. This is my first sort of experience being at Dallas College, and we're sort of building everything from scratch.
I think to Melissa's question, there's something from across our network that I might share that relates to Melissa's question. We're really talking about reconceptualizing what it means to become a teacher. It's not just the structure, as has been said here. It's not just the structure, it's not just the money. Both of those are important components, but it's really thinking about teacher preparation as sort of having a new third space where there is collaboration between the program and the district, where there's more like a three-way conversation across all of the partners who are working directly with the candidates. So the program and the mentor teacher and the candidate, that there's that kind of conversation is going on in those programs. This doesn't happen everywhere, but these sorts of orientations towards seeing the people who are aspiring teachers, not as, finishing up their programs, but actually, as Jacqueline said in the chat, as they're part of our team today. And so what does it look like to have conversations? Just imagine yourself hiring a new person onto some project. You're going to have conversations about, I forgot to tell you, this is how we do this. And here's the process for that. Our major goal here is this. So there's real communication. It's not about watching and then being coached when you do a practice lesson. It's really about being part of that team from the first day that you're in there as a resident, so that you're truly ready to be a teacher when you're your first day as a teacher.
Wonderful. So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'd like to give a wonderful, wonderful round of applause to all of our panelists and all of their great knowledge on this topic. And again, we will hopefully be having a part 2 of this webinar, doing a deep dive later this month. So please be on the lookout for that. And we have tons of other webinars that'll be happening this month surrounding this topic.
I think Sabrina might have froze, but we appreciate everyone joining us, and we'll see you next time. Thanks, y'all.
Thank you all. Good luck with anything you take on.